Chapter 1888. Head to the hall on the left, the old man said with a smile. Lu Ming nodded and walked toward the hall on the left. In the hall on the left, a beautiful lady received Lu Ming. Sir, what kind of information are you looking for? For example, information about people, cultivation techniques and martial skills, or even information about Saint herbs and materials. The young lady wore a gentle smile on her face, giving off a comfortable feeling. A kind of sacred herb. Lu Ming said. If you're looking for a sacred herb, please head to the 6th room. I'll show you the way. The young lady smiled and walked gracefully, leading Lu Ming to a room at the side of the hall. Lu Ming sighed. The Vientiane Tower had a clear division of labor. Different rooms would be assigned to different information. This way the efficiency would be better. After entering the 6th room, Lu Ming saw an elegant middle-aged man. Sir, what kind of sacred herb would you like to know? The middle-aged man asked. The Tai Sui treasure lotus. I want to know where I can find the Tai Sui treasure lotus, or where I can find it. Lu Ming said. The Tai Sui treasure lotus is an extremely rare sacred herb with a unique medicinal effect. Not many of them have appeared since the ancient times. The middle-aged man exclaimed. Lu Ming's heart sank as he said, even the Vientiane Tower doesn't have any information about the Tai Sui treasure lotus. Haha, I can only say that you're in luck. If you came a few days earlier, your trip would have been in vain. However, I just received a piece of information about the Tai Sui treasure lotus yesterday. Someone has seen the Tai Sui treasure lotus somewhere. The middle-aged man burst out laughing. Where is it? Lu Ming was overjoyed. Brother, don't worry. The Tai Sui treasure lotus is too rare. The Vientiane Tower had to pay a huge price to obtain this information. You'll have to pay the price if you want to know about it. The middle-aged man said with a smile. How many origin stones? Lu Ming asked. He knew that he would need origin stones to obtain the information. Information about something as rare as the Tai Sui treasured lotus is naturally valuable. 500,000 high-grade origin stones for this piece of information. The middle-aged man said. The corner of Lu Ming's lips twitched slightly. 500,000 high-grade origin stones for a piece of information? How expensive! Of course, the Vientiane Tower's members were spread all over the world. It's priced to nurture so many people. Alright, I'll take the information about the Tai Sui treasure lotus. Lu Ming took out a storage ring and filled it with 500,000 high-grade raw stones. He passed it to the elegant middle-aged man. But the Tai Sui treasure lotus is extremely spiritual consciousness. Not long after, he returned to the Yuanshan Academy. Then he sent a message to Huangling, Longchun, and the others, saying that he would be leaving for a while. He planned to go to the Tai Sword Tomb immediately to find the Tai Sui treasure lotus, so that Autumn Moon could recover her memories. For things like memories, the longer it was delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for Qiuyu, and the harder it would be for her to recover. Lu Ming didn't have to worry about the sacred academy of Origin Mountain. Huangli had broken through to the absolute saint realm, and his strength had increased greatly. Luo Tianyi was also with them. Lu Ming didn't waste any time, and walked to the teleportation formation of the sacred academy of Origin Mountain. Of course, he couldn't teleport directly to the Tai Sword Tomb. Instead, he teleported to the public teleportation area near the Tai Sword Tomb. In fact, every Emperor-level force would build a teleportation formation. But almost all of them were one-way. People from the outside couldn't teleport in. If people from the outside could teleport into a force, that force would be in danger. If they were an enemy, it would be even more dangerous. Only forces that had a good relationship with each other would have a two-way teleportation formation. Therefore, in many areas, there would be public teleportation areas. For example, outside the ancient moon sacred ground, outside the ancient sun sacred ground, and the 8 citadels around the celestial city were all public teleportation areas. If outsiders wanted to enter these places, they could only teleport to the public teleportation area, and then fly there. Therefore, if they wanted to go to a certain place, they could only teleport to the nearest public teleportation area, and then fly there. After all, the primordial mountain was too big. It was unrealistic to rely on flying. Even an ordinary emperor-level expert would need a long time to cross the entire primordial mountain. Lu Ming stepped into the teleportation formation and teleported to the public teleportation area closest to the Tai Sword Tomb. Then, he took out the flying shuttle and flew toward the Tai Sword Tomb. Lu Ming had obtained this sky-piercing flying shuttle after killing his enemies. It was 20 times faster than the sky-piercing flying shuttle that Valley Master Yunкong had. In the flying shuttle, Lu Ming returned to his original appearance and released Autumn Moon from the mountain river diagram. What's so magical about the Heavenly Emperor's sword? Show me. Autumn Moon came out and looked at Lu Ming curiously. Was this person really her young master? His talent was also amazing. He could barely be her young master. Autumn Moon had a strange thought in her mind. Lu Ming nodded. With a thought, the Heavenly Emperor's sword appeared in his hand. The Heavenly Emperor's sword really looked like a stone sword. It was polished from a strange stone. Moreover, at this time, there was no abnormality at all. It was as if it was really an ordinary stone sword. There was no shocking phenomenon like when it was first pulled out. This is really the Heavenly Emperor's sword. It looks very ordinary. Could the legend be wrong? Autumn Moon looked at the stone sword curiously, then took it and looked at it carefully. Finally, she injected her saint power, but the stone sword did not react at all. Lu Ming took it, and also injected his saint power. He even channeled the law of primal chaos, but there was no reaction at all. There's no reaction at all. It's become a useless sword. Lu Ming was speechless. Then the two of them studied it again, but there was still no result. Lu Ming had to put it in the mountain river diagram. He would study it later. The distance to the Tai Sword Tomb was not short. Even with the flying shuttle that was 20 times the speed, it would still take half a month. The two of them began to cultivate in the flying shuttle. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. They came to a wild mountain range surrounded by vast mountains. In the mountains, the roars of beasts were incessant. Lu Ming put away the flying shuttle. The two of them walked on air. After more than 100,000 miles, they found that the area was getting quieter and quieter. There were fewer and fewer living creatures. Finally, they saw a huge cave. It was like a huge demonic well that led underground. In the cave, there was a constant aura of death. That was why there was a dead silence around the cave. Chapter 1889. The Tai Sword Tomb was the place where swords were buried. It was said that in the distant past, an extremely powerful sword cultivator had fallen in the Tai Sword Tomb. This place became his tomb, attracting the worship of tens of thousands of swords. Countless ownerless swords flew here, and were buried together with that terrifying cultivator. Later on, countless powerful sword cultivators coveted the sword cultivator's inheritance. In order to obtain the sword cultivator's inheritance, a fierce battle broke out there. Countless powerful sword cultivators had died in battle here, and were buried here. This place became a terrifying sword tomb. Later on, many sword cultivators who had reached the end of their lifespan and were about to die would come here and be buried there. Over time, the number of experts and swords buried here was innumerable. It was impossible to tell how many of them had been buried here. Over time, some wonderful treasures were born in the Tai Sword Tomb. For example, the sword origin was a rare treasure. Refining the sword origin could refine one's true origin and saint force to improve one's cultivation. Some people would also come here to look for spiritual swords. Since ancient times, many sword cultivators had been buried here. It was said that there were even many emperor-level sword cultivators. Some of the swords left behind by them were real treasures. If one was lucky enough to get it, he would be rich. Therefore, the Tai Sword Tomb attracted many people to explore. Many people would come here every year, especially sword cultivators. The Tai Sui treasured lotus had been found by explorers here. Lu Ming scanned the area. True enough, he saw some figures near the cave. You too. A gentle-looking old man flew over and looked at Lu Ming and Xiao Moon. He smiled and said, "You two also want to explore the sword tomb, right?" "That's right." Lu Ming nodded. "It just so happens that I'm forming a team with some friends to enter the sword tomb together. After all, there are opportunities and dangers in the sword tomb. There's strength in numbers, and we can help each other. Young friends, Are you willing to join us? The old man smiled and said, Team up. Lu Ming thought to himself. The Tai sword tomb was full of opportunities and dangers. Since ancient times, many sword cultivators had been buried here, and some dangerous things had been born. They were the sword aura. The sword baleful beasts would kill any living being they encountered. They had no intelligence at all. There were strong sword emanations and weak sword emanations. Some sword emanations were extremely powerful, and it would be very dangerous for a single person to encounter them. Thus, it was normal for many people to form teams and enter the sword emanations. Senior, the two of us are here to search for a type of sacred medicine, Lu Ming said. Haha, that's great. The Tai sword tomb is extremely vast. Just relying on the two of you is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Come with us and keep an eye on each other. You'll have a better chance, the old man said with a smile. All right, I agree. Lu Ming pondered for a moment, then nodded. The old man's words made sense. It was indeed difficult for the two of them to search for Zhang Xian. If they teamed up with more people, their chances of success would be higher. Moreover, some of these people might have been active here for a long time. They might be able to obtain some useful information. All right, haha, come, let me introduce you to the others. The old man smiled and led Lu Ming and Autumn Moon towards the others. There were 8 people at the entrance of the cave. The old man introduced them. After the old man's introduction, Lu Ming learned that the old man's name was Wuxia. He was a perfected paragon saint. Among these people, his cultivation was the highest. Young friends, we'll have to wait a little longer. We'll go in when there are more people, Wuxia said. He had a gentle smile on his face, which made him seem easy to get along with. It's fine to wait a little longer. Lu Ming nodded. Finding the Tai Sui treasured lotus wasn't something that could be done in a day. It wouldn't hurt to wait a few more days. There were indeed many people who came to explore the Tai sword tomb. Every 2 days there would be people who came, and Wuxia pulled them into the group. More than 10 days later, there were more than 20 people in the group. All right, it's about time. Let's go, Wuxia said. Then, he took the lead and flew into the cave, followed by the others. The cave was huge, and it led underground. It was unfathomable. Lu Ming and the others flew down for about 10,000 feet before they finally reached the bottom. It really looks like an underground world. Lu Ming looked around and found that there was a world under the cave. He couldn't see the end of it. There were mountain peaks in this place, but it was deathly still. There was nothing here. There were only swords. Rusty swords were either stuck in the ground or on the mountain peaks. However, they had lost their spirituality and were about to corrode after countless years. Let's set up a formation so that we won't panic when we're attacked, Wuxia said. Then he arranged the formation. Lu Ming and Qiu Moon were arranged to be at the back. Some of them were in the middle, while others were in the front and left. Lu Ming's eyes flashed. He found that those who were arranged to be in the front, back, left, and right were the people who joined the group later. Wuxia was in the middle with 5 or 6 people. According to him, his cultivation was the highest. He would be in the middle to provide support at any time. The others didn't have any objections. They chose a direction and ran forward. The Tai sword tomb gave people the impression of being dead silent. There was silence between heaven and earth. Occasionally, there would be gusts of cold wind blowing. Not a single blade of grass grew. It was incomparably desolate. They ran forward for hundreds of miles. The scenery they saw was similar. This was the outer area. The swords they encountered were all corroded. There wouldn't be much to gain in this area. After walking for an unknown distance, 2 figures suddenly appeared in front of them. They were 2 black figures. Their appearances couldn't be seen clearly. They looked like ghosts. When the 2 black figures saw Lu Ming and the others, their eyes emitted a sharp aura. They turned into 2 beams of sword light and charged at the group. They are 2 sword emanations. However, their strength is only at the bright sage realm, Wuxia said. With a wave of his hand, 2 beams of energy shot out and defeated the 2 sword emanations. After the 2 sword emanations were defeated, they turned into 2 beams of energy and sank into the ground, disappearing. It was said that these sword emanations were very difficult to kill. They could only be defeated temporarily. After being defeated, they would escape into the ground. After a period of time, they would reappear. The group continued forward. They encountered a few more sword emanations, but they were not strong and were easily defeated. Suddenly, a weak sword intent came from the front. There's a sword source in front. Wu Chu's eyes lit up. It was obvious that this was not Wu Chu's first time entering the Tai sword tomb. He was very experienced. Based on a weak sword intent, he could determine that there was a sword source in front. The group restrained their auras and moved forward carefully. After circling around a mountain, they saw dozens of sword emanations. Chapter 1890. Among the dozens of sword emanations, there were 3 battle swords. These 3 battle swords were not real, and were not real battle swords. Instead, they were condensed from extremely pure sword qi, and were inserted into the ground. These were the sword sources. Dozens of sword emanations surrounded the 3 sword sources. The sword emanations could absorb the energy from the sword sources to strengthen themselves. Therefore, there were sword emanations guarding each sword source. Since there were 3 sword sources here, there were naturally more sword emanations guarding them. 3 sword sources. Wu Chu's gentle eyes emitted a blazing light. What should we do? Someone asked. We can't fight head-on. Otherwise, it will be troublesome if we alert the other sword emanations. The best way is to attract the sword emanations and use our powerful combat strength to instantly seize the 3 sword emanations. Wu Chu's eyes emitted a scheming light as he made arrangements. You guys split up and lure the sword emanations away. The few of us with the strongest cultivation will instantly seize the 3 sword sources. Wu Chu pointed at Lu Ming, Qiu Moon, and a few others who joined the team later. We're going to lure them? Someone asked. That's right. In this sword tomb, we can only maximize our strength and obtain more resources by cooperating with each other. Don't worry, after we obtain the sword sources, we will split them equally. You guys won't get anything less. Wu Chu said. All right, let's lure them. That person nodded, and the others had no objections. Lu Ming and the rest slowly approached the sword emanations from different directions. When they were a certain distance away, the sword emanations discovered them, and a sharp light shot out from their eyes. Whoosh, whoosh. Then, the sword emanations turned into streaks of sword radiance, and chased after Lu Ming and the rest. Let's go. Lu Ming pulled Qiu Moon and turned to run. The others did the same. They all turned and ran into the distance, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Beside the sword sources, there were only 7 or 8 sword emanations left. It's good to find some bait. It can save a lot of effort. Beside Wu Chu, a middle-aged man sneered. He looked in the direction Lu Ming, and the rest had left with a mocking smile on his face. There's no time. Let's attack and seize the 3 sword sources. Wu Chu took a step forward and charged toward the 7 or 8 sword emanations. His cultivation was at the peak of the absolute saint realm. With a single palm strike, 2 sword emanations were destroyed and turned into energy that sank into the ground. The other people beside Wu Chu also attacked. They released their auras. They were all absolute saints. Everyone attacked together. The 7 or 8 sword emanations did not last long before they were all killed. Qiu Moon. Qiu Moon. Qiu. 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 Lu Ming's heart stirred and there was a cold glint in his eyes. Qiu. Lu Ming transmitted his voice to Qiu. Qiu Moon stopped abruptly. He waved his hand. 2 scimitars flew out. They spun quickly and swept toward the sword emanations. One of the sword fiends was equivalent to a lesser saint, while the others were all great saints. They weren't Qiu's match at all. 2 scimitars swept past, and the sword fiends crumbled, turning into energy and dissipating. It was the screams of the other people who had attracted the sword emanations. Lu Ming's eyes grew colder. He and Qiu Moon, Wu Chu and the rest had already gotten the 3 sword sources. They were retreating. They were surprised to see Lu Ming and Qiu. Looks like they're both geniuses. Even the sword emanations of absolute saints can't do anything to them. Wu Chu's eyes flashed. He smiled gently and said, Lu Ming, return to the team. We'll retreat first. Lu Ming nodded. He and Xiao Moon returned to the team quietly and retreated. Not long after, an ear-piercing roar came from the place where they had obtained the sword sources. It was obvious that the sword emanations had returned and realized that the sword sources were gone. Not long after, a few people who had attracted the sword emanations returned to the team. These people's cultivation was not weak. They didn't die at the hands of the sword emanations. Wu Chu, where are the sword sources? You said we'd split them equally. Someone looked at Wu Chu. Haha, don't worry. We've only gotten 3 sword sources. I'll keep them for now. When we get more sword sources in the future, I'll split them equally. Wu Chu laughed. That person snorted and didn't say anything. There was a cold smile at the corners of Lu Ming's lips. There was a sharp glint in Xiao Yu's eyes, but the two of them did not say much. They continued forward. Not long after, Wu Chu sensed something again. There's another sword source in front. Wu Chu was overjoyed. The group moved forward and found a sword origin in a valley. The number of sword emanations guarding a single sword origin was relatively low. There were only about 3. Let's attack together and destroy these sword emanations, Wu Chu said. There were only about 10 sword emanations. There was no need to lure them away. Lu Ming and the rest were strong. They might be useful if they were kept alive. Wu Chu's lips curled into a sneer. In the next moment his expression suddenly changed. On the other side, more than a dozen figures flashed and appeared there. They were all martial Dao experts. Obviously, they had entered the sword tomb before. There were many people in the sword tomb. Every few days, people would enter the sword tomb. No one knew how many people there were in the sword tomb. It was obvious that the other party was also an adventurer. The other party also saw Lu Ming and the rest. Their gazes were unfriendly. Some of them even revealed murderous intent. Wu Chu and the rest's faces darkened. Get lost. That sword source belongs to us. Someone in the other party said coldly. You're the ones getting lost. Wu Chu sneered. How could he let go of the sword source that was right in front of him? He turned and looked at Lu Ming and the rest. You guys go and stop them. We'll go and get the sword source. Wu Chu sent a voice transmission to Lu Ming, Xiao Moon and a few others. These people were the ones who had gone to attract the sword emanations. They were also the ones they had found as bait. I knew it. Lu Ming's lips curled into a cold smile. You want us to stop them? What a joke. There are many experts among them. If we go, we'll be courting death. I refuse. A short and stout man shook his head and refused directly. There was no lack of experts in the sword tomb. Among the dozen or so people, at least half of them were absolute saints. There might even be absolute saints at the peak of the absolute saint realm like Wu Chu. Asking them to stop them would be suicide. Chapter 1891. Wu Chu glanced at Lu Ming and the others with sharp eyes. He said that as long as Lu Ming and the others could hold on for a while, he would help them when they got the sword origin. We asked you to do something, but you're so wishy-washy. We asked you to follow us and block the danger for you. Do you think you can just eat and drink for free? You have to do something valuable. A burly man beside Wu Chu said to them with a gloomy face. Lu Ming sneered. Wu Chu and the others were blocking the danger for them? What a joke. They were clearly using them as bait. If there was danger, they would let them go. It was the same now. They were asking them to block the danger while they went to get the sword origin. Who knew if they would run away after getting the sword origin? I'm not going. If you want to fight, fight among yourselves. I'll leave the team. I'd rather take the risk alone in the sword tomb. A burly man shook his head and refused. Then he wanted to leave. But at this moment Wu Chu suddenly moved. He attacked violently and clawed at the brawny man. The burly man did not expect Wu Chu to attack him. He was a lesser absolute saint, but he could not use his full strength. Wu Chu was a perfected absolute saint. The difference between them was too great. He could not fight back at all. Puff! Wu Chu's claw cracked the burly man's head. The burly man roared. His eyes were filled with anger and indignation. Die. Wuchu's power surged out. The burly man's head exploded like a watermelon. His soul was instantly destroyed. It's too late to leave now. Go and stop them. Otherwise you'll die. Wuchu said coldly to Lu Ming and the others. Lu Ming and Qiu Moon's eyes were gloomy. The others were pale. The dozen people opposite them looked at them in surprise. Haha, we haven't even started the battle, and there's already an internal conflict. One of them sneered. No matter what tricks they're playing, get ready to attack. We have to get the sword origin. These people have to die too. The person with the strongest aura said coldly. Not only did they want the sword origin, but they also wanted to kill Lu Ming and the others. How could finding the sword origin be faster than killing people? On Lu Ming's side. Alright, let's attack. Lu Ming nodded in agreement. The others could only nod helplessly. When I tell you to start, you guys attack immediately and catch them off guard. Wuchu transmitted his voice, and then suddenly roared, kill. Whoosh. Whoosh. The figures of Lu Ming and the others flashed as they charged towards the other party. However, before he could get very far, Lu Ming's palm chopped down like a saber. A stream of energy as large as a mountain shot towards him. You're courting death. Kill them all. The leader of the other side let out a furious roar. More than 10 people erupted and charged towards Lu Ming's group. Retreat. Lu Ming shouted in a low voice. Together with Qiu Yu, he suddenly turned around and rushed towards Wuchu and the others. The others were stunned for a moment before fleeing in other directions. How could they really throw their lives away? All of you are courting death. Seeing that Lu Ming and the others were actually running in the opposite direction, and were rushing towards them, Chifu was immediately enraged. You're really treating us as bait. What a joke. Lu Ming sneered as he and Qiu Yu charged towards Wuchu and the others. The other party also rushed towards Wuchu and the others. Little brat, I'll kill you first. A burly man of the Saint Realm launched a fierce attack towards Lu Ming. Scram. Lu Ming shouted coldly as he punched out. He directly crushed the opponent's attack, and then collided with the opponent's palm. Crack. The opponent's hand bones were directly shattered. He frantically retreated with a look of disbelief. However, Lu Ming and Qiu Yu did not continue to fight. They rushed past him and rushed into the distance. Following that, the other party had already rushed over. All sorts of attacks poured towards Wuchu and the others. The two sides immediately engaged in a chaotic battle. Damn it, little brat, I'll kill you sooner or later. Wuchu roared, his eyes filled with killing intent as he looked at Lu Ming and Qiu Yu. Lu Ming was actually so daring. Not only did he want to escape, but he also wanted to lead the other party to them. He deserved to be cut into pieces. Old man, save your own life first. Goodbye. Lu Ming laughed as he and Qiu Yu did not stop. They quickly flashed away. The other party saw that Lu Ming and the others were just two young men, so they did not care at all. They only stared at Wuchu and the others and attacked ferociously. Not long after, Lu Ming and Qiu Yu had already left the battlefield and appeared tens of thousands of miles away. The two of them did not have a fixed direction. Their goal was to find the Taisui treasure lotus. However, they did not know where the Taisui treasure lotus would appear in the sword tomb. They could only search randomly. The two of them randomly chose a direction and ran forward. Not long after, they found two sword sources. Beside them, there were about 20 sword emanations guarding them. Since they had encountered them, they naturally would not give up. Although the sword emanations were strong, with their battle strength, it was not too difficult. The two of them charged toward the sword sources at lightning speed. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sword emanations also noticed Lu Ming and Qiu Yu. They charged toward Lu Ming and Qiu Yu. Their bodies were like divine swords, shining with dazzling sword light as they slashed toward the two. Qiu Yu waved his hand. Two scimitars, one cold and one hot, flew out and continued to spin. The cold and hot collided, exploding with a destructive force that swept forward. The sword emanations, regardless of whether they were supreme saints or absolute saints, were instantly crushed by the destructive force. With Qiu Yu's battle strength, he could instantly kill an ordinary absolute saint expert. Boom! Boom! Lu Ming's attack was even more direct. He kept punching with his fists. A phantom of the suppressing prison monument appeared, and suppressed the sword emanations. All the sword emanations that were suppressed by the suppressing prison monument were instantly crushed. Even 2 absolute saints in the Great Completion were instantly killed. In a few breaths of time, the 20 sword emanations were cleared out by the 2 of them. The 2 of them each grabbed a sword origin and soared into the air, leaving this place. 10,000 miles away, in a valley, Lu Ming carefully examined the sword source in his hand. The sword source looked like a real battle sword from the outside, but when Lu Ming scanned it with his spiritual consciousness, he could clearly feel that it was formed by sword energy. Swallow! Lu Ming's palm exploded with a devouring power. The sword source exploded under the devouring power, turning into a gust of energy that was devoured by Lu Ming. Lu Ming sensed it carefully. He found that the sword source's energy seemed to be formed by thousands of tiny sword lights that merged with Lu Ming's saint power. They were like countless sharp sword lights, refining Lu Ming's saint power and making it stronger. Lu Ming started to refine the sword source. After more than 2 hours, Lu Ming finally finished refining the sword source's energy. My saint power has indeed become stronger and more condensed, Lu Ming thought. Chapter 1892. No wonder so many people had entered the sword tomb to search for sword sources. Some people's cultivation had reached a bottleneck, and it was difficult for them to improve. However, if they refine the sword sources, they might be able to improve further. This was especially true for those who practiced the sword Tao. Lu Ming waited for a while longer before Chiu Moon finished her cultivation and refined a sword source. Then the 2 of them left the place and continued their search. It would be good to obtain some sword sources while searching for the Taisui treasure lotus, as they could improve their cultivation. Soon after, the 2 of them found another sword source and kept it for the time being. The sword tomb was really huge. Lu Ming and the 2 of them wandered around for a whole day, but they still couldn't see the end of it. They had also obtained 4 sword sources, which was 2 for each of them. Whoosh! Whoosh! Suddenly, a group of figures rushed out from a call in front of them and surrounded the 2 of them. There were 8 of them in total. They were all old men or middle-aged men, and they were all filled with killing intent. There were 5 great sages and 3 absolute sages. However, the most powerful one was only in the Great Achievement Absolute Sage realm. Lu Ming's lips curled into a cold smile. So it's 2 brats. One of them sneered and looked at Lu Ming and Chiu Moon coldly. But this girl is really beautiful. I can enjoy her. A middle-aged skinny man who was as thin as a bamboo looked at Chiu Moon with a burning gaze. Kid, hand over all the treasures you have. The skinny man said coldly. On average, there would be people entering the sword tomb every few days. Therefore, there were many people in the sword tomb. There were all kinds of people in the sword tomb. There were even some people who lived in the sword tomb all year round. They killed and robbed others of their treasures and sword sources to cultivate. In the sword tomb, no matter which faction you came from, your death would be in vain. No one would know who killed you or how you died. Obviously, these people in front of them were here to kill and rob. They were here to kill those who were alone or had a small group. I'll give you 3 breaths to get lost. 3. Lu Ming said indifferently. What? This brat told us to scram. Haha. Did I hear wrongly? Someone laughed loudly, unable to believe his own ears. Judging from the age of Lu Ming and Qiu Yu, how old were they? What level of cultivation and combat strength could they have at this age? And he even told them to scram? What a joke. 2. Lu Ming continued. His voice was even colder and filled with cold killing intent. The faces of the 8 people darkened. It seemed that Lu Ming wasn't joking. Could it be that Lu Ming had something to rely on? However, from the looks of it, Lu Ming and Li Qie were not even 30 years old. How could they be a match for them at such a young age? They had been active in the vicinity of the Tai Sword Tomb for over 100 years. During this period, they had encountered some young people, but they were no match for them. Many of them had died at their hands. However, this was the first time he had seen someone as confident as Lu Ming. 1. Lu Ming slowly spat out the last word, and the killing intent in his eyes surged. It seems that you don't want to leave. Then I'll fulfill your wish and let you be buried here with the thousands of battle swords. Lu Ming said coldly. Brat, you're boasting shamelessly. I'd like to see what you're capable of. A perfected great sage took a heavy step forward. His body was like a cannonball as he charged toward Lu Ming. His sacred power and nomological laws erupted. He was like a prehistoric giant beast, pressing down on Lu Ming. Bang! Lu Ming lifted his leg and kicked out. His foot landed directly on the opponent's dantian. The opponent screamed in pain. His body flew thousands of meters away and crashed into a mountain full of battle swords, creating a huge pit in the mountain. As for him, he was already exhaling more than he was inhaling. The remaining 7 people were stunned. A great saint in the complete perfection was like a baby in front of Lu Ming. He didn't even have the strength to resist. Could it be that this person had the combat strength of an absolute saint at such a young age? How was that possible? Bang! Lu Ming took a step forward. The aura of a great saint in the complete perfection was fully released. The powerful aura locked onto the other 7 people. He had already given them a chance. Since they didn't take it, he would kill them all. Anyway, these people were not good people. He did not know how many people like Lu Ming and the rest had died in their hands. Qiu Moon stood aside and didn't make a move. She knew Lu Ming's combat strength very well. She didn't need to do anything to deal with these people. Let's work together and kill him. The skinny man shouted. His aura erupted and he charged toward Lu Ming. At the same time, the other 6 people also moved. Each of them released their aura. Terrifying attacks bombarded Lu Ming. Lu Ming stood still. An absolute saint weapon appeared in his hand, and he swept it out. A moon-like sword light burst out and slashed in all directions. All the attacks of the opponents were instantly destroyed. Puff! 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 Blood light burst out and blood chi filled the air. The 7 figures pounced quickly, but the speed of their retreat was even faster. The 7 figures flew more than 1,000 meters and fell heavily on the ground. 6 of them had no vitality left. They were directly killed by Lu Ming's sword light. Only the skinny man still had a trace of vitality. He didn't die yet. His eyes were wide open, filled with endless horror and disbelief. He was just a young man, less than 30 years old. He actually had the cultivation of a great saint in the complete perfection. His combat strength was even more terrifying. Even he, a great saint in the great mastery, couldn't withstand a single blow. Could it be that young people nowadays were all so terrifying? They had been in the sword tomb for hundreds of years and didn't go out. Had the outside world changed? With endless questions, he breathed his last breath. Lu Ming waved his hand, and the 8 people's storage rings came to his hand. He scanned the storage rings with his spiritual sense, and saw the things in them at a glance. These people were really rich. The origin stones were piled up like mountains. It was obvious that they had killed many people over the years. There were also more than 10 sword sources in total. Sword sources were consumables. It was good enough to have 10 of them. Lu Ming gave half of them to Autumn Moon and left. In the next few days, they found a few more sword sources, but they still didn't see the Tai Sui lotus. It seemed that it wasn't easy to find the Tai Sui lotus. They had to be prepared for a long battle. There's a sword source over there. Suddenly, they saw a sword source in front of them. The 2 of them rushed toward it. At that moment, something strange happened. Clang! A sword cry resounded as the sword origin actually flew up on its own and whistled towards the depths of the sword tomb. The sword source moved on its own? The 2 of them didn't have time to think. They stepped into the air and chased after the sword source. However, the sword source's speed was shocking. It was like a ray of light that disappeared into the distance in an instant. Lu Ming and Autumn Moon couldn't catch up for a while. There's one there too. Chapter 1893. In another direction, a few sword sources broke through the air and flew toward the depths of the sword tomb. They were heading in the same direction as the sword sources that Lu Ming and the rest were chasing. What's going on? The 2 were puzzled. Why would the sword sources fly on their own? It would be fine if there was only one, but now there were several. The 2 chased for a while, going deeper and deeper into the sword tomb. At this time, they saw more sword sources flying toward the sword tomb, and some of them were being chased by people. Wait, Autumn Moon, wait a minute. Lu Ming stopped and frowned. There must be something wrong in the depths of the sword tomb. Otherwise, why would so many sword sources fly in the same direction? In a place like this, if there were any abnormalities, it would be either the birth of a treasure or the arrival of a danger. Lu Ming, should we chase them or not? Autumn Moon asked. She also felt that something was wrong. If they continued to chase, she did not know what would happen. Let's not go deeper. Let's see if we can find the Tai Sui treasure lotus in the outer area. Lu Ming said. Autumn Moon nodded. After that, the two did not continue to go deeper. They continued to search in the outer area. From time to time, they would see sword sources whizzing through the air, flying toward the depths of the sword tomb. They would also see figures flying in the air, chasing after the sword sources. When Lu Ming and Autumn Moon were lucky, they could intercept one or two sword sources along the way. Lu Ming, look, that's... Autumn Moon suddenly exclaimed and pointed at a cliff in front of them. Lu Ming looked in that direction, and saw a lotus flower on the cliff. It was as white as jade and crystal clear. The strange thing was that the petals of the lotus flower were thin, long, and sharp like divine swords. The Tai Sui treasure lotus. Lu Ming had seen it in the records of the Great Pill Evolution Hall, so he recognized it at a glance. Lu Ming was overjoyed. It was really a case of traveling far and wide looking for something, only to find it by chance. They had searched for a long time without finding any trace of the Tai Sui treasure lotus. They did not expect to see it when they stopped chasing, and wanted to search in the outer area. The Tai Sui treasure lotus is very intelligent. It can escape on its own. Autumn Moon, stay here and block it. I'll go get it. Lu Ming transmitted his voice to Autumn Moon, then used the divine breathing technique and flew silently toward the Tai Sui treasure lotus. When Lu Ming was a certain distance away, dense runes appeared on his palm. He pressed his palm on the ground, and the runes spread along the ground toward the Tai Sui treasure lotus. He wanted to seal the Tai Sui treasured lotus with the formation Dao to prevent it from escaping. However, the Tai Sui treasure lotus suddenly moved. It turned into a white beam of light, resembling a white sword. It broke through the sky and flew towards the depths of the tomb. Not good, we've been discovered. Qiu Yu, chase after them. Lu Ming transmitted his voice to Autumn Moon, then used his movement technique to chase after the Tai Sui treasure lotus. Lu Ming was very fast, but so was the Tai Sui treasure lotus. It was as fast as the sword sources. Lu Ming could not catch up with it. The Tai Sui treasure lotus is too sensitive. I was so careful, but it still found me. Lu Ming was speechless. He could only give chase. Autumn Moon followed closely behind Lu Ming. The direction in which the Tai Sui treasured lotus fled was exactly the same as the direction in which the swords had fled. They chased the Tai Sui treasure lotus for several hours, but they could not catch up with it. At this moment, Lu Ming could not help but miss Bubbles. If Bubbles were around, given the speed of the space-time law and the sealing power, it would not be difficult to capture the Tai Sui treasure lotus. After chasing for a while, Lu Ming's pupils suddenly shrank. The scene in front of him shocked him. There was an abyss in front of him. Above the abyss, countless sword sources gathered and danced in the air. Sword chi soared into the sky. There were too many sword sources. It was impossible to tell how many of them there were. Around the abyss, there were many people standing in the air. At a glance, there were at least a few hundred of them. They surrounded the abyss, but did not take any action to seize the sword sources. That was because the scene was too strange. They had never seen so many sword sources gathering above the abyss. There had to be something fishy going on. No one dared to act rashly. Whoosh! At that moment, the Tai Sui treasure lotus turned into a beam of sword light and disappeared into the abyss. This is troublesome. Lu Ming's face turned gloomy. It was not easy to find the Tai Sui treasure lotus. Unfortunately, he could not take it. He could only watch as it fled into the abyss. Lu Ming and Autumn Moon stood outside, looking ahead. They did not act rashly. Many people looked at the endless source of swords. Their eyes were burning with greed. There were so many sword sources. If they could refine them, how much could their cultivation improve? However, the situation was strange. Although they were greedy, they still kept their rationality and restrained themselves. Brat, it's you. At this moment, a furious roar could be heard. The sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. A few figures dashed toward Lu Ming and his companion. So it's these guys. Lu Ming looked in the direction of the voice and sneered. The person who flashed over was Wu Chu. At that moment, there were only 2 people left beside Wu Chu. It was obvious that they had suffered heavy losses. Whoosh! Whoosh! Wu Chu and the other 2 surrounded Lu Ming and Autumn Moon. Brat, how dare you betray us? I'll make sure you die miserably. Wu Chu glared at Lu Ming furiously. His murderous intent was extremely strong. Previously, because of Lu Ming, not only did they not get the sword sources, but they also fought fiercely with the other party. In the end, many of them died in battle. Only the 3 of them managed to break out of the encirclement. They naturally blamed all of this on Lu Ming and the others. If Lu Ming and the others had acted according to their plan, they would not have suffered such losses. Betray you? What a joke. I only joined your team to cooperate with you. You used us as bait from the beginning. Do you think I would be stupid enough to die for you? Lu Ming smiled faintly. There was strong disdain in his eyes. Weaklings should have the awareness of weaklings. Wu Chu said coldly. Weaklings? Haha, you're already so old, but you're only in the saint realm. Do you think you're strong? Lu Ming was not afraid at all. Whether I'm strong or not, I'm strong enough to kill you. Wu Chu took a step forward and fully unleashed his cultivation as a perfected saint. His withered claw grabbed at Lu Ming with a terrifying whistling sound. Lu Ming's eyes lit up. He activated the hell-suppressing heaven skill and punched out. Bam! Lu Ming's fist collided with Wu Chu's claw. With a loud boom, both of their bodies were pushed back slightly. You! How is this possible? Wu Chu's eyes widened in disbelief. Lu Ming could actually block his attack. How was this possible? It was unbelievable that a perfected great saint could block the attack of a perfected saint. The others around them were also shocked. That's the law of primal chaos. He's a son of primal chaos. Chapter 1894. Many people recognized Lu Ming's law of primal chaos, and they exclaimed in shock. They hadn't expected a son of primal chaos to appear here. No wonder his battle prowess was so terrifying. Wu Chu was shocked, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. He'd actually provoked a son of primal chaos. But then the killing intent in his eyes grew stronger. Since he'd already offended him, he'd kill him and get rid of all future troubles. Otherwise, he'd be the one to die in the future. He was a decisive person. After making a decision, he immediately said, "Let's go and kill him together." He said to the other 2. Whoosh! Autumn Moon stepped into the air, 2 scimitars floating around him. He said, "Lu Ming, leave these 2 to me." Okay. Lu Ming nodded. Although the cultivation levels of the other 2 were very high, one was a great sage and the other was a peak great sage, given Xiaoyu's cultivation level, it would not be a problem for her to block them. Autumn Moon stepped into the air, surrounded by the law of yin and yang, and charged toward the 2. The 2 sides immediately clashed. Kill! Lu Ming shouted. He used the divine sword technique, and his soul pierced toward the other party like a sword. At the same time, Lu Ming stretched out his finger and pointed at the void. Endless energy gathered in the void, forming a huge finger that pressed down on Wu Chu. Wu Chu's pupils contracted rapidly, and a chill ran down his spine. It was as if he was facing a fatal danger. Heavenly Centipede Claw. Wu Chu roared and unleashed his strength to the extreme. He used a divine power, and a huge claw formed, grabbing toward the chaotic calamity finger. Boom! The huge claw and the chaotic calamity finger collided. The void began to tremble violently. In the next moment, under Wu Chu's horrified gaze, the claw he had condensed collapsed. The powerful force of the primal chaos tribulation finger slammed into his body, causing him to cough up large mouthfuls of blood. His body crashed heavily into the ground. Wu Chu's battle prowess wasn't very strong in the absolute saint realm. His theurgy was only at 85%, and it was just an ordinary law. It couldn't be compared to the 88% chaotic disaster finger. It was too weak. Wu Chu was severely injured in one move. That attack just now was Lu Ming's strongest attack. Primal Chaos Calamity Finger. Lu Ming pointed his finger again, and another Chaos Finger of Calamity was formed. Wu Chu revealed a look of despair as he desperately tried to resist. However, after this attack, Wu Chu's injuries became even more severe. Half of his body almost exploded. Facing ordinary martial artists, Lu Ming could completely cross a realm and kill the enemy. Boom. Boom. Then Lu Ming punched continuously. The terrifying fist force drowned Wu Chu. Wu Chu held madly, letting out a roar of unwillingness. He did everything he could to resist, but gradually, his voice became softer and softer until it finally disappeared. By the time Lu Ming stopped, Wu Chua had already disappeared. His body and soul had been destroyed, leaving only a storage ring on the ground. With a wave of his hand, Lu Ming collected Wu Chua's storage ring. The faces of the two people who were fighting Autumn Moon changed drastically, as they were filled with fear. That pinnacle absolute saint broke through Chiao Autumn Moon's attack and tried to escape. "Do you think you can escape?" Lu Ming said coldly. His figure flashed, and he instantly caught up with that person. He pointed his finger, and the chaos finger of calamity was formed, crushing toward that person. That person screamed in pain as his body was torn apart, and he died on the spot. A pinnacle absolute saint expert was instantly killed by Lu Ming. The remaining absolute saint expert was also turned into ashes under Chiao Autumn Moon's destructive energy. 3 great experts had died so quickly at the hands of 2 young people, which made the nearby people very solemn. The Son of Chaos is really shocking. His combat strength is incredible. It's better not to provoke such a peerless genius. I'm afraid there's a terrifying force behind him. Some people discussed as they looked at Lu Ming and Chiao Autumn Moon solemnly. Lu Ming and Chiao Autumn Moon stood on one side and looked toward the abyss. The others also calmed down and looked toward the endless sword source. As time passed, more and more people gathered, which made many people's faces turn gloomy. Forget it. If this continues, more and more people will come, and we won't be able to get many sword sources. I want to try and see if there's anything strange about it. Finally, someone couldn't take it anymore. An old man stepped out and rushed toward the sword sources. He was very close to the sword sources, but there was nothing strange. "Grab them." The old man stretched out a large hand, which was formed by Saint Power, and grabbed toward the sword sources. The hand grabbed, but there was still nothing strange. The old man grabbed a dozen sword sources and put them away. Ha ha ha. The old man was overjoyed. There was no danger at all. They were overthinking. Seeing that there was no danger, the others all looked greedy. They were about to fight for the sword sources. At this moment, a terrifying sword light suddenly slashed out from the abyss below. Oh no! The old man's face changed drastically. He waved his hand and set up layers of defense, trying to block it. However, the sword light slashed through the old man's defense instantly. The sword light didn't stop. The old man screamed as his body was cut in half. His body fell into the abyss and disappeared. Everyone was shocked and stopped in their tracks. "There's someone in the abyss," someone exclaimed. Sure enough, a person holding a long sword stepped out from the abyss. It was a middle-aged man in a brocade robe. His aura was extremely shocking. He had reached the peak of the absolute saint realm. Clearly, the sword light just now was from this person. There was someone in the abyss? Could it be that the sword sources were gathering because of this person? "Kill!" The man roared. Sword Chi whistled and charged toward the crowd. "It's just a peak absolute saint. Let's work together and kill him." Someone shouted and counterattacked. Then someone else attacked. There were many experts who had entered the sword tomb to explore. They came from all over the Yuan Mountain. Even the weakest of them was a great saint. Many of them were absolute saints, and there was no lack of peak absolute saints among them. 3 peak absolute saints attacked and fought with the person who had walked out of the abyss. The person who had walked out of the abyss was naturally no match for them. However, the person who had walked out of the abyss didn't seem to be afraid of death. He attacked with all his might and didn't care about defense. Something's not right. This person doesn't seem to have any intelligence. He only knows how to attack. Lu Ming's eyes flickered. He found that the person who had walked out of the abyss had empty eyes. He looked like a walking corpse. Oh no, someone else has walked out of the abyss. Someone shouted. Everyone looked over. More figures had appeared in the abyss, and it wasn't just one or two. There were many of them. One figure after another appeared, filled with cold killing intent. As soon as they appeared, they charged toward the crowd. That's the leader of the Round Blade faction. I know him. I heard that he had been adventuring in the Sword Tomb. So he's here? That's wind-chasing Sword Lu Shirlang. He doesn't seem to recognize me at all. Exclamations sounded. Chapter 1895. More and more people stepped out of the abyss. Without saying a word, they charged toward the crowd. In the end, more than 100 people stepped out. They were all experts, and most of them were absolute saints. These people were not afraid of death, and were very troublesome. The scene fell into chaos. These people are just walking corpses. Let's work together and kill them. Someone shouted. There were at least 300 to 400 people here, and they were all experts. They worked together and attacked the people who had walked out of the abyss. That is. At this moment, Lu Ming saw a person and was shocked. Because Lu Ming actually knew one of them. The Life and Death Sword Sect Master. Lu Ming had never thought that he would see the Life and Death Sword Sect Master here. Back in the Tsang state, they had been ambushed by the evil spirit sect. In the end, they had broken out together. The Life and Death Sword Sect Master had brought Luo Xiang and succeeded in breaking out. He had never thought that he would appear in the Sword Tomb. Moreover, the Life and Death Sword Sect Master was like those people who had walked out of the abyss. He had completely lost his mind. His eyes were empty, and only his cultivation and combat power were left. Whoosh! The Life and Death Sword technique of the Life and Death Sword Sect Master was very terrifying. With one sword, an absolute saint expert's forehead was pierced. Junior brother, you're courting death. An old man roared and charged toward the Life and Death Sword Sect Master. This person was at the peak of the absolute saint realm. With one slash, he destroyed the Life and Death Sword Sect Master's attack. The saber didn't stop and slashed toward the Life and Death Sword Sect Master. Lu Ming took a step forward and threw a punch, sending that person's saber flying. What are you doing? This person is crazy. He has lost his mind. The person shouted. I'll take care of him. Lu Ming said indifferently. The peak absolute saint was very afraid of Lu Ming. He gritted his teeth and left to kill the people who had walked out of the abyss. Whoosh! The Life and Death Sword Sect Master attacked again. The sword light pierced through the sky. Lu Ming could see that the Life and Death Sword Sect Master's cultivation was at the peak of the absolute saint realm. Lu Ming punched out and destroyed the Life and Death Sword Sect Master's sword light. Senior, wake up! Lu Ming shouted. His voice rumbled like thunder, and blasted into the head of the Life and Death Sword faction. Kill. The leader of the Life and Death Sword faction did not seem to notice anything, and continued to attack Lu Ming. Lu Ming blocked the other party's attack and shouted continuously, but the other party did not react at all. Lu Ming, this person's soul seems to have been obliterated. Autumn Moon appeared beside Lu Ming and said, What's going on? Lu Ming frowned. The leader of the Life and Death Sword faction had a good relationship with the Dragon God Valley in the past. They had fought against enemies together. Lu Ming did not want to see the leader of the Life and Death Sword faction fall, but unfortunately, there was nothing he could do. Lu Ming, is this someone you know? But he has indeed fallen. If you can't bear it, then give him to someone else. Autumn Moon said. Lu Ming nodded and quickly retreated with Autumn Moon, killing the other people who had walked out of the abyss. As for the leader of the Life and Death Sword faction, he continued to kill the others. However, there were even more people outside. Soon, the leader of the Life and Death Sword faction was surrounded by a few experts. His body exploded and fell into the abyss. Lu Ming sighed. The leader of a sect in the Tsang state, an overlord of a region, had ended up like this after leaving the Tsang state. He had escaped from the evil spirit sect, but in the end he had fallen here. Lu Ming could not help but think about Luo Xiang, who was with the leader of the Life and Death Sword faction. He was an upright person and also a terrifying genius. He had stayed at the same cultivation level and nurtured his sword soul for 15 years. No one knew what kind of achievements he could achieve in the future. Had he also perished? Lu Ming's thoughts were many, but his attacks did not stop. He killed 2 people who had walked out of the abyss. There were fewer people who had walked out of the abyss. In the end, they were surrounded and killed one by one. However, these people were very powerful and did not fear death. The people outside had also paid a heavy price. About 100 people were killed, and their blood dyed the ground red. When the last person who had walked out of the abyss was killed, everyone's gaze turned back to the abyss. Was there anyone else in the abyss? Why were those people like walking corpses? Were they being controlled? Many people's eyes flickered as various thoughts ran through their minds. However, no one dared to go up and snatch the sword sources. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, the sword sources gathered together and flew down into the abyss. In less than a minute, the endless source of swords flew down into the abyss and disappeared. Everyone looked at each other. All the sword sources had flown down into the abyss. What should they do? Should they go down? However, the abyss was very mysterious and terrifying. Previously, more than 100 experts had walked out of the abyss. All of them had no intelligence and were like walking corpses. They only knew how to kill. What was at the bottom of the abyss? Was it the appearance of a rare treasure that attracted the sword sources? Or was there some danger? Everyone looked at each other. They all wanted the others to go down first to explore. If there was danger, they could retreat in time. Everyone had the same thought. Who would take the lead? After a moment of stalemate, someone finally spoke. Everyone, we can't go on like this. Why don't we join forces and explore together? A purple-robed elder suggested. All right, I agree. Instead of being in a stalemate, why don't we join forces and explore together? A burly man said. All right then. Those who want to go down and explore, take a few steps forward. Those who don't want to go down, retreat. We won't force you. The purple-robed elder said and took a step forward. Following that, the burly man also took a step forward. Some people pondered for a moment before taking a step forward. Disregarding everything else, the endless sword sources were definitely an irresistible temptation. If they could obtain a part of it, their cultivation would definitely improve rapidly. Especially those who cultivated the sword. Not only could it improve their cultivation, but it could also temper their swordsmanship and improve their comprehension of the law of the sword. Even if there was danger, it was worth taking the risk. Lu Ming and Qiu Yu also took a step forward. The Taisui treasure lotus had escaped into the abyss. No matter what, they had to go down and search for it. Otherwise, they did not know when they would find it. However, not everyone wanted to go down and explore. Some shook their heads and took a few steps back. The abyss was too strange. No one could predict what dangers there would be. If they lost their lives, what was the point of obtaining the sword sources? However, only a few people retreated. More people planned to go down and explore. Everyone, those who don't want to go down, let them stay here forever. At this time, a cold light flashed in the purple-robed elder's eyes as he transmitted his voice to Lu Ming and the others. Why? Someone asked with a glint in his eyes. Those who don't want to go down have ulterior motives. They probably want us to go down first to explore. Who knows if they will go down after we go down? There's no such good thing in the world. Also, some people are probably waiting for us to come out, and then ambush us. If we get injured down there, won't we be killed by these scoundrels? So these people can't be left alive. Chapter 1896. The purple-robed elder's words caused many people's eyes to flicker. That's right, we can't let these people live. If we let them live, we might be leaving a disaster for ourselves. The burly man also said coldly, I also think we can't let them live. Then let's kill them. The others also spoke one after another. Of course, they were all transmitting their voices. Those who chose to stay could not hear them at all. All right. Then let's kill them first. Let's go down and surround them first. Don't let them escape. The purple-robed elder said. Immediately, the crowd's figures flashed and surrounded those who had chosen to stay. Lu Ming and Autumn Moon did not move. Although the martial world was very cruel and the weak were prey to the strong, Lu Ming and Autumn Moon had their own principles. These people had no enmity with them, so they would not kill them for this reason. Of course, they would not stop them either. What are you doing? The expressions of those who chose to stay changed drastically. Kill. The purple-robed elder shouted coldly. They made their move. Dazzling and fatal rays of light burst out and attacked those who chose to stay. Those who chose to stay were already in the minority. How could they resist? Instantly they were killed one by one. You guys are too vicious. Someone roared, extremely unwilling to give up. Ridiculous. The burly man sneered and slashed out with his saber, killing that person. In just a few minutes, those who chose to stay were all killed. One wrong move, and those people would be facing death. All right, now that there's nothing to worry about, let's go down, the purple-robed elder said. Then, everyone formed a formation and flew carefully into the abyss. Looking down from above the abyss, it was pitch black and nothing could be seen. Descend. The purple-robed elder's cultivation was unfathomable. He was a quasi-emperor expert, so everyone naturally followed his lead. As soon as his voice fell, everyone flew down the abyss. The abyss was very deep. They descended for thousands of feet before reaching the bottom. As soon as they landed, Lu Ming looked in a direction in shock. In that direction, there was a giant sword that was at least 100 meters tall. It was incomparably huge. Under the giant sword, a figure sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. No aura could be felt from his body. Luoxiang, Lu Ming murmured. As expected, Luoxiang was also in this abyss. However, Luoxiang did not rush out of the abyss like his master, the leader of the Life and Death Sword faction. Instead, he sat under the giant sword and did not feel the slightest bit of aura. Could it be that he had already fallen? Lu Ming couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. Although he had not interacted much with Luoxiang, he could feel that this person was an upright person who lived for the sword. He was a true swordsman. Then Lu Ming's gaze turned in another direction. There endless sword sources gathered, spiraling about. Under the boundless sword source, there was a figure staring at Lu Ming and the others with sharp eyes. This is a sword termination. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. The figure under the endless sword origin was clearly a sword aura. However, this sword aura was completely different from the sword aura that Lu Ming had seen before. Not only was this sword aura more solid, but there was also a glint of wisdom in its eyes. This sword terminus possessed intelligence. The others also noticed this sword terminus, and their expressions turned solemn. Lu Ming, Taisui treasured lotus. At the side, Qiu Moon nudged Lu Ming and whispered. Lu Ming followed Qiu Moon's gaze, and saw the Taisui treasured lotus rooted on a pile of bones. The lotus petals swayed gently and rippled with sword chi. You're all here. Just in time. Sacrifice yourselves to my sword. The sword terminus let out an ear-piercing laugh. How is this possible? Aren't sword terminus without intelligence? How could this sword terminus have intelligence? Could it be that those who came out of the abyss were all controlled by him? Is the sword origin gathering also because of him? Many people's expressions changed, and they were shocked. Some of them had been in the Tai sword tomb for many years, and had never heard of sword terminus gaining intelligence. They had also never seen sword origin gathering here. Today, I'll sacrifice your blood to my sword. Form. Sword Sha shouted as he raised his palm. The endless sword origin gathered toward Sword Sha's arm, and condensed together to form a huge battle sword. At the same time, wisps of blood chi gathered from above the abyss and gathered on the sword terminus, making his body more solid. This blood chi was the blood of those who had died in the battle above the abyss. Could it be that those figures who had come out and fought with them earlier wanted blood? Many people's expressions turned ugly when they thought of this. Boom! A terrifying aura burst out from the sword emanation's body. This aura was incomparably powerful and superior. It was even stronger and purer than the aura of a quasi-emperor, like the purple-robed elder. This was Emperor's aura. Everyone's expression changed drastically. This was pure Emperor's aura. This was an Emperor-level expert. There was actually an Emperor-level expert hiding in the abyss. Many people's hearts trembled, and they felt a chill run down their spine. Let's go. Someone roared and soared into the air, rushing toward the abyss in an attempt to escape. In the face of an Emperor-level expert, no matter how many people they had, it was useless. Only death awaited them. I've said that I'll sacrifice your blood to my sword to help me take the last step. All of you stay here. The sword terminus let out a sinister laugh. He raised the huge sword in his hand that was formed by the endless sword origin. Suddenly, in the sky, endless sword radiance gathered. These sword radiance were like the battle sword. The tip of the sword was pointed downwards, revealing its sharpness and sealing off all directions. Kill! The sword terminus roared again. Endless sword radiance covered the sky and pierced toward the crowd. Suddenly, screams rang out. One by one, the figures were either pierced by the sword radiance or split in half. Their souls were annihilated, and they died on the spot. After these people died, their blood gathered toward the sword terminus, making his aura even stronger. Wheel of Yin Yang! Autumn Moon shouted. A round wheel appeared in between her eyebrows. This round wheel emitted a cold chi on one side, and a blazing chi on the other. The combination of the two emitted a terrifying aura. That was the Emperor's aura. Obviously, this was an Emperor weapon. The wheel of Yin Yang floated above Autumn Moon's head. A light curtain fell, enveloping Lu Ming and Autumn Moon within it. Dong! Dong! Those sword radiance bombarded the light curtain cast by the wheel of Yin Yang. The light curtain shook violently and rippled. But in the end, it blocked the sword radiance's bombardment. Lu Ming's eyebrows also flashed with light. He originally wanted to use the Tai Chi array to block it. But after seeing that Autumn Moon could block it, he did not use it for the time being. Keeping a few trump cards might be of great use at a critical moment. Chapter 1897. There had been hundreds of them when they'd come down, but now, there were only 20 of them left. The weakest of the remaining 20 or so people were at the peak of the Absolute Saint Realm. In other words, everyone below the peak of the Absolute Saint Realm had been killed in that wave of attacks. Even the perfected Absolute Saints who'd survived were all injured. What a terrifying attack. Ordinary Absolute Saints couldn't even fight back against it. Imperial weapon. Sword emanations glanced coldly at Autumn Moon and Lu Ming. Run, run, run. The remaining people were terrified. They frantically rushed toward the abyss. Lu Ming and Autumn Moon also rushed toward the abyss from another direction. More than 20 streaks of light moved at a shocking speed. However, sword emanations was even faster. He took a step forward and appeared in the air above the crowd. Boundless sword light began to converge. This time, the endless sword lights fused together. In the end, there were only 20 or so sword lights left. However, the might emitted by each of the sword lights increased explosively, giving off an incomparably terrifying feeling. Use your blood as a sacrifice to my sword. Kill! Sword emanations yelled. More than 20 streaks of sword light charged toward Lu Ming and the others. On average, one sword light fell for each person. Pooh! Pooh! Everyone used all their power to block, but some people couldn't block it at all. All attacks and defenses collapsed as the sword light slashed through. More than a dozen people were killed. They would never be able to leave this place. They were all at the peak of the Absolute Saint Realm. Only a few perfected Absolute Saints were able to block the attack with secret treasures. However, they were also severely injured. Autumn Moon also tried his best to control the Yin Yang wheel to block the attack. Although he managed to block it in the end, Autumn Moon's body trembled. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Apart from them, 2 other people blocked the sword light. They were unharmed. One was the purple-robed elder from before. He was a quasi-emperor. The river of laws surrounded him. He defeated the sword light with one strike. The other person was a woman in a palace dress. She was also a quasi-emperor. She defeated the sword light. The 2 quasi-emperors destroyed the sword light and rushed upward. Haha! Even a quasi-emperor must die. The sword emanation sneered as he waved the huge sword in his hand. Boundless sword light appeared once again, and gathered into a few sword lights that slashed towards the 2 boundary emperors. Break! The 2 boundary emperors bellowed. The rivers of law formed a terrifying attack that collided with the sword light. However, the sword light this time was clearly stronger. The 2 quasi-emperors trembled, and were sent flying downwards. This sword baleful has not fully become a martial emperor. We still have a chance. Let's work together and charge out. If we split up, we will all die. The purple-robed elder roared, and a purple river of laws revolved around his body. He turned into a purple beam of light and rushed to the side of the woman. At the same time, the remaining perfected absolute saints also rushed toward them. Just as Autumn Moon was about to leave, she was stopped by Lu Ming. "Let's not go there. Let's go get the Tai Sui treasured lotus." Lu Ming secretly transmitted a message to Autumn Moon. They didn't rush towards the purple-robed old man and the others. Instead, they rushed towards the Tai Sui treasure lotus. On the other hand, the purple-robed old man and the others gathered together and rushed upwards at the same time. The sword emanations glanced at Lu Ming and Autumn Moon coldly, and then ignored them. He looked at the purple-robed old man and the others and sneered. "Although I am close to becoming a martial emperor, it is more than enough to kill you. After killing you, I will use your blood to help me become a martial emperor." Condense. As the sword emanations uttered the last word, boundless sword light gathered and turned into 3 huge sword lights. They slashed towards the purple-robed old man and the others from 3 different directions. Boom, boom, boom. 3 terrifying attacks and boundless sword chi filled the area. Many sword marks appeared on the canyon at the edge of the abyss. After a few screams, the remaining absolute saints of the absolute saint realm were killed by the terrifying power. Only the 2 emperors-to-be were still alive. However, the 2 boundary emperors' faces were pale. "Why aren't the 2 of you working together? Do you want to die here together?" The purple-robed old man roared. He was obviously talking to Lu Ming and Autumn Moon. However, Lu Ming didn't seem to hear him. He pulled Autumn Moon and rushed towards the Tai Sui treasure lotus. He felt a terrifying sense of danger from the sword emanations. He had a feeling that even if he worked together with the purple-robed old man and the others, they wouldn't be able to get out. They would only be able to get out if they used a special attack. "Damn it!" the purple-robed old man roared. He worked together with the woman and 2 rivers of law turned into terrifying attacks. The sword emanations took a step forward and 3 sword lights formed again. They slashed towards the purple-robed old man and the woman. The purple-robed old man and the woman trembled as they were pushed back. They were at a disadvantage. Right then, Lu Ming was about to reach the Tai Sui treasure lotus. The sword emanations narrowed his eyes. The giant sword that was condensed from the sword origin in his hand vibrated slightly. Dozens of terrifying sword gleams shot toward Lu Ming and the sword emanations. Tai Sui array disc. Lu Ming's glabella lit up and the Tai Sui array disc appeared. It expanded rapidly and blocked in front of the 2. Clang, clang, clang. The sword light slashed onto the Tai Sui array disc, and it shook violently. However, the Tai Sui array disc was an emperor-level treasure. It was extremely sturdy and didn't even leave a mark on it. Lu Ming and Autumn Moon continued to rush towards the Tai Sui treasure lotus. The petals of the Tai Sui treasure lotus rippled, as if it had sensed Lu Ming and Autumn Moon. "Seal." Lu Ming spat out a word. Then, dense runes appeared on the ground around the Tai Sui treasure lotus. These runes formed a sealing force that enveloped the Tai Sui treasure lotus like a huge net. The Tai Sui treasure lotus emitted a dazzling sword chi and tried to rush out. However, it was blocked by the sealing force. With his previous experience, Lu Ming would not go all out. During the impact earlier, Lu Ming had already secretly injected the law of array into the ground. Through the ground, he arrived near the Tai Sui treasure lotus. Then he suddenly attacked and sealed the Tai Sui treasure lotus. Lu Ming and Autumn Moon rushed over. Lu Ming grabbed the Tai Sui treasure lotus and put it into the mountain river diagram. "Let's go." With the Tai Sui treasure lotus in hand, Lu Ming and Autumn Moon turned into 2 streaks of light and rushed towards the abyss from another direction. "Don't even think about leaving," the sword demon said coldly. He couldn't let anyone leave today. If news of him got out and a true emperor-level figure came, he would be finished. He waved the huge sword in his hand, and beams of sword gleams appeared above Lu Ming and Qiu Yu's heads, slashing toward them. Lu Ming blocked with the Tai Sui array disc. All the sword lights slashed onto the Tai Sui array disc. The Tai Sui array disc vibrated and Lu Ming and Autumn Moon were blocked. "Kill." The sword demon blocked Lu Ming and Autumn Moon with his sword lights and focused more on the purple-robed elder and the woman. The 3 huge sword lights that were attacking the purple-robed elder and the woman gathered together to form an even bigger sword light. Chapter 1898. Swoosh. The sword light slashed down. Even with the purple-robed elders and the woman's cultivation, they almost could not block it. The river of laws was almost pierced through as blood spurted from their mouths. However, what made them despair was that the giant sword slashed down again. They could only try their best to block it. Autumn Moon, enter the mountain and river diagram. Lu Ming sent a voice transmission to Autumn Moon. The mountain and river diagram flew out and sucked Autumn Moon into it. Lu Ming's glabella shone again, as he took out the Great Elixir Development Furnace. Lu Ming rushed into the Great Elixir Development Furnace, and controlled it to fly upwards. The Great Elixir Development Furnace was the most precious treasure of the Great Elixir Development Palace. It was unknown what grade it was, but it was definitely above the Taichi Array Disc. Clang, clang, clang. The sword light kept slashing on the Great Elixir Development Furnace. The Great Elixir Development Furnace shook, but it was still slowly moving upwards. This was Lu Ming's plan. He wanted the purple-robed elder and the woman, the two boundary emperors, to hold back the sword emanations while he rushed out with the Great Elixir Development Furnace. If he was with the purple-robed elder and the others, they would not be able to escape from the sword emanations' all-out attack. The sword emanations' expression changed slightly. He did not expect Lu Ming to have so many treasures on him. Each one was stronger than the previous one. If this continued, he would not be able to free himself and Lu Ming might really escape. Don't even think about it. Today all of you will stay here. These treasures are all mine. The sword emanations roared as his body emitted a blood-red light. This blood-red light was the blood-red light that he had just absorbed. At this moment, it flowed out from his body like water. It looked extremely strange. Then, the blood-red light flowed to the giant sword in his hand and burned like a flame. The giant sword in his hand seemed to have turned into a terrifying killing sword. Return. The giant sword light that attacked the purple-robed elder, and the others also flew into the giant sword and merged with it. This made the giant sword in the sword emanation's hand even more terrifying. Swoosh. The sword emanation stepped into the air, and slashed the giant sword in his hand towards the purple-robed elder and the woman. The terrifying sword might covered the sky and earth. It was terrifying to the extreme, causing the space to tremble as if it had the power to split the heavens and earth apart. Not good. The faces of the purple-robed elder and the woman in the palatial dress changed dramatically, revealing expressions of terror. The might of this sword strike already surpassed that of a quasi-emperor, infinitely close to that of a martial emperor. With this strike, they were all going to die. No, I don't want to die. The purple-robed elder roared in his heart as his eyes revealed a ferocious look. Suddenly he attacked and struck the woman with his palm, sending her flying into the air towards the sword emanations. You despicable! The woman in the palace dress roared. Her eyes were filled with endless fury and fear. But at this time, in order to save her life, she could only use all her strength to resist. She unleashed all of her techniques and even took out all of her saint weapons. However, in the face of the sword emanations, everything was in vain. As the giant sword slashed down, all of the woman's defenses, as well as her body, were reduced to ashes. This brat! After the purple-robed elder sent the woman flying with his palm, he charged towards Lu Ming. Lu Ming had consecutively taken out his emperor weapon. If he could obtain Lu Ming's emperor weapon, his chances of escaping would be greatly increased. However, the sword emanations would not let him have his way. Trying to escape? Die. After the sword emanations killed the woman in the palace dress, its body flashed and appeared above the purple-robed elder. The purple-robed elder's face was as white as snow. No, he roared, but under the slash of the sword light, he followed in the footsteps of the woman in the palace dress and was reduced to ashes. He pushed the woman in the palace dress towards the sword emanations, but he only lived for a few more breaths. Not good. Lu Ming's face changed drastically in the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace. The sword emanations had been using some of its sword light to obstruct him. At this time, he had not managed to get too far. Moreover, he did not expect that the purple-robed elder and the woman in the palace dress, two emperor-to-be experts, would be killed so quickly. The sword emanations had obviously used a method to temporarily increase his combat strength. allowing his combat strength to be infinitely close to that of an emperor-level expert. "Brat, it's your turn now." The sword emanation sneered and took a step forward. He appeared above the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace and slashed down with his giant sword. Boom! The giant sword slashed on the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace. The Great Evolution Elixir Furnace shook violently. Like a cannonball, it fell into the abyss and landed heavily on the ground. The entire abyss shook violently. 100-meter deep pit was formed in the ground. The Great Evolution Elixir Furnace was embedded in the deep pit. Within the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace, Lu Ming spat out mouthfuls of blood. His face was pale. Although he had the protection of the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace, Lu Ming's cultivation was limited. He could not unleash the full power of the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace. Moreover, his cultivation was too far from the Sword Emanations Elixir Furnace. The Sword Emanations Elixir Furnace was enough to injure Lu Ming. This treasure is really amazing. Haha, not only will I become an emperor-level expert today, I will also obtain a few rare treasures. The heavens are really helping me. The Sword Emanations Elixir Furnace laughed loudly. He appeared above the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace and slashed at it again. Dong! The Great Evolution Elixir Furnace shook violently. The terrifying power caused the surrounding ground to shatter. The 100-meter deep pit exploded once again and became even bigger. The Great Evolution Elixir Furnace shook and produced a terrifying power that bombarded Lu Ming's body. It caused Lu Ming to spit out mouthfuls of blood and his injuries to worsen. This can't go on. Lu Ming's mind raced as he tried to think of a way to escape. However, under such circumstances, he had no way to escape. The difference in strength between him and the Sword Emanations Elixir Furnace was too great. Even with the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace, it could not protect him. If this went on, he would be killed sooner or later. He might even exhaust his saint power and lose control of the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace. Let's see how long you can hide. Slash. 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 The Sword Emanations Elixir Furnace roared. The giant sword in his hand that was formed from the endless sword origin continuously slashed at the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace. The entire abyss was shaking non-stop. Cracks that looked like spider webs appeared on the ground and extended in all directions. Within the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace, Lu Ming used all of his strength. The law of primal chaos protected his body and saint power surrounded his body. However, the terrifying vibrations continued to bombard his body, causing his injuries to worsen. Not long after, the Sword Emanations Elixir Furnace had attacked more than 100 times. Lu Ming's aura was extremely weak, and his injuries were severe. Not good. Suddenly Lu Ming's face changed. He felt that he was starting to lose control of the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace. Boom! As expected, when the Sword Emanations Elixir Furnace slashed down again, the Great Evolution Elixir Furnace shook and began to shrink rapidly. Finally, it turned into a ray of light and flew into Lu Ming's forehead and disappeared. Lu Ming's body appeared in the deep pit. "Ha ha ha, kid, you're finally out. Let's see how you're going to stop me now." The Sword Emanations Elixir Furnace laughed sinisterly and was filled with killing intent. In order to deal with Lu Ming, he had expended a large amount of yuan qi. Now he was not even confident that he could break through to the Martial Emperor realm. Chapter 1899. What should I do? Lu Ming quickly thought of a solution in his mind. Lu Ming still had one last method, which was to enter the mountain-river diagram. However, once he entered the mountain-river diagram, it would be exposed and controlled by the other party. Moreover, he was not confident that the mountain-river diagram could stop the other party. The mountain-river diagram was just a grotto heaven treasure, and its defensive power could not be as strong as the Great Pill Derivation Furnace. Once he entered the mountain-river diagram, he would be completely passive and at the mercy of the other party. Am I going to die here today? Lu Ming clenched his fists and was extremely unwilling. In his life, he had experienced many difficulties and dangers. He had experienced all kinds of dangers, but he had still managed to overcome them one by one. He was unwilling to die just like that. He wanted to reach the peak of martial arts. Die. At this moment, The sword emanations shouted coldly and slashed the giant sword in his hand at Lu Ming. This sword could kill a quasi-emperor in an instant, and its power was extremely powerful. Before the sword arrived, the terrifying pressure had already made it difficult for Lu Ming to move. The strong pressure pressed on Lu Ming's body, causing his bones to creak as if they were about to break. This sword was unstoppable. No, I can't die. I have friends and family that need my protection. My parents need my protection. I don't know where Xiaoqing is now. I have to find her, Xiang Emoli. Once I die, Qiu Moon will also die. I can't die. I have to reach the peak and change my fate. Lu Ming roared in his heart, bursting with endless fighting spirit. Even if he was in a desperate situation, he was unwilling to die. Even if he could not defeat the other party, he had to fight. Even if he died, he had to fight to the death. His eyes were full of unyielding determination. He was unyielding to the sword emanations and unyielding to fate. Clang. At this moment, the sound of a sword rang through the 9 heavens. Within the mountain river diagram, a stone sword broke through the barrier of the mountain river diagram and flew out, hovering above Lu Ming's head. A terrifying sword radiance shot out from the stone sword and shot up into the sky. The sword radiance from the sword emanations was destroyed by this sword radiance. This is the sword of the Celestial Emperor. Lu Ming never would have thought that the Celestial Emperor's sword would suddenly rush out and block his opponent's sword at the critical moment. This sword emanation's gaze also landed on the sword of the Celestial Varch. He did not know why, but when he saw the sword his heart trembled. Divine sword, a peerless divine sword. If I get this sword, my cultivation will break through the shackles in an instant and reach the martial emperor realm. I might even be able to reach higher realms in the future. The sword emanation's eyes emitted a fiery glow. He was a sword baleful spirit that had been unintentionally nurtured by the Tai sword tomb after countless years. He possessed intelligence. However, he was still lacking at the Khanate level. Unlike the human race, it was extremely difficult for him to advance. It was much more difficult for him compared to humans, demons, and divine beasts. He had cultivated bitterly for many years and finally found the opportunity to break through to the martial emperor realm. But because of Lu Ming, the opportunity for a breakthrough had become mysterious again. However, Lu Ming actually had a peerless divine sword in his hands. He had a feeling that as long as he could get this peerless divine sword, he would be able to advance rapidly in the future. Even his cultivation speed would skyrocket. He had to get this sword. Lad, you have a lot of treasures in your hands. Hand over this sword obediently, and I can give you a quick death. Sword emanations looked coldly at Lu Ming, but the greed in his eyes could not be concealed. If you let me go, I can give it to you. Lu Ming's eyes flashed as he said. All right, I agree to let you go. Hand over the sword to me. Sword emanations did not hesitate and immediately nodded. Do you think I am stupid? If I hand it over to you now, what if you go back on your word? Wait until I get out of here. Then I will hand it over to you. Lu Ming said. Lad, you are not qualified to talk terms with me now. If you don't hand it over, then I will take it myself. Sword emanations said coldly. The aura on his body became stronger, and the huge sword in his hand emitted a terrifying fluctuation. Swoosh. He slashed down with the sword again. This time, the power of the sword was even stronger than before. Buzz. The sword of the Heavenly Emperor vibrated slightly and scattered a sword screen, enveloping Lu Ming within it. Sword emanation's sword radiance slashed on the light screen. It was like a drop of water falling into the sea. There were no ripples and it disappeared immediately. No, it did not disappear. It was absorbed by the sword of the Heavenly Emperor. Buzz. The sword of the Heavenly Emperor vibrated again, and emitted a terrifying suction force. Sword emanation's face changed. At this moment, he felt a terrifying suction force from the sword of the Heavenly Emperor. The huge sword in his hand was about to fly toward the sword of the Heavenly Emperor. A few of the sword sources even left the huge sword and flew toward the sword of the Heavenly Emperor. They entered the sword of the Heavenly Emperor and disappeared. The sword of the Heavenly Emperor vibrated slightly, as if it was very excited. The suction force became stronger. You want to swallow my sword sources? Stop. Sword emanations roared. Blood radiance continuously flowed out of his body and burned fiercely. His strength increased tremendously, and he forcefully stabilized the huge sword in his hand. Your sword is indeed amazing. However, if you want to swallow my sword sources, don't even think about it. Sword emanations shouted, his gaze as cold as a knife. What if I join in? At this moment, a cold voice sounded. It was not Lu Ming who had spoken. Apart from Lu Ming and sword emanations, there was a third person here? Luo Xiang. Lu Ming immediately thought of Luo Xiang. He extended his spiritual senses and saw that Luo Xiang had opened his eyes. Above his head, there was a black and white sword floating. That was his sword soul. Luo Xiang was not dead. You are not dead yet. Sword emanation screamed. If you are not dead, how can I die? Swallow. Luo Xiang said coldly. When he spat out the last word, the huge sword on his back that was stuck in the ground vibrated violently. Clang. The humming of the sword whistled as the gigantic sword emitted an incomparably resplendent light. Unexpectedly, it also exploded with a terrifying attractive force that enveloped the sword chi. A few sword sources flew out of the huge sword in sword emanation's hands and entered the huge sword. At this moment, the sword of the Heavenly Emperor also seized the opportunity and released its suction force. Swoosh! Swoosh! The huge sword in sword emanation's hands continued to send sword sources into the sword of the Heavenly Emperor. Being enveloped by the sword of the Heavenly Emperor and the huge sword on Luo Xiang's back at the same time, sword emanations finally could not resist. What frightened him was that he could not leave this place even if he wanted to. He realized that his body could not move at all. He was being sucked in by the sword of the Heavenly Emperor and the huge sword on Luo Xiang's back. As for the huge sword in his hands, sword sources were being separated and absorbed by the sword of the Heavenly Emperor and the huge sword. Swoosh! Suddenly, two sword sources flew towards Lu Ming. Lu Ming felt that this seemed to be a reward from the sword of the Heavenly Emperor. Lu Ming was stunned. Chapter 1900. In his dantian, the two saint hearts were operating at full power. The saint power slowly grew stronger and flowed into Lu Ming's limbs and bones. Lu Ming's injuries started to heal. On the other side, Luo Xiang's situation was very similar to Lu Ming's. The giant sword could actually split into sword sources and fly to Luo Xiang, which were absorbed by his sword spirit. Luo Xiang sat there without moving. He was like an old monk in meditation, cultivating wholeheartedly. No, Sword Sha screamed and kept exploding. He wanted to resist, but it was useless in the end. He couldn't move at all. He seemed to be restrained. As the sword sources in his giant sword kept being absorbed, his ability to resist became weaker and weaker. However, there were too many sword sources in the giant sword. It was endless. It couldn't be absorbed in a short time. Time flew by quickly. Day after day passed. With Lu Ming's spiritual body's strength, his injuries were healed after a day. He then used the sword source's power to refine his true origin and improve his cultivation. Every time the sword source's power was refined, two more sword sources would fly to him and be devoured by Lu Ming. As time passed, Lu Ming's cultivation became stronger and stronger. He was close to becoming an absolute saint. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. In 3 months, the endless sword sources in Sword Sha's hand were almost completely absorbed by the Heavenly Emperor's sword and the giant sword. Lu Ming also refined many sword sources. His cultivation had reached the peak of the Supreme Saint realm. He was very close to becoming an absolute saint. It wasn't that easy to become an absolute saint. Although Lu Ming had refined many sword sources during this time, he still hadn't broken through. He needed an opportunity. However, Lu Ming was already very satisfied. It was very difficult for a supreme saint to become an absolute saint. It needed a long time to accumulate. Without enough accumulation, it was impossible to improve. Take Autumn Moon for example. When Lu Ming saw Autumn Moon was already a peak supreme saint. But now, she still hadn't become an absolute saint. She was accumulating. Only after accumulating to a certain extent would one be able to make a breakthrough. Under normal circumstances, Given that Lu Ming had cultivated 2 sacred hearts, he would not be able to break through to the absolute saint realm without a few years of accumulation. But now, Lu Ming had completed several years of accumulation in just 3 months. The Celestial Emperor's sword had absorbed a large amount of sword origin. There was a layer of faint white light on it, looking incomparably mysterious. On Luo Xiang's back, the giant sword also emitted a dazzling sword light. On the surface of the sword, there were mysterious runes flowing. No, I can't accept this, Sword Emanations muttered to himself. At that moment, his aura was extremely weak, and he was extremely weak. When the last sword origin was absorbed, the Celestial Emperor's sword shook and withdrew all of its aura. It turned back into an ordinary stone sword and flew into Lu Ming's forehead. It floated in Lu Ming's sea of consciousness. Lu Ming moved his mind, and the Celestial Emperor's sword appeared in Lu Ming's hand. But after Lu Ming injected his saint power into it, he realized that the Celestial Emperor's sword didn't react at all. Is this really the Celestial Emperor's sword? I can't unleash its power at all. Lu Ming was speechless. He put the Celestial Emperor's sword back into his sea of consciousness. At that moment, the giant sword on Luo Xiang's back shook as if it was going to break out of the ground. The light on the sword became even more dazzling. An even stronger suction force enveloped Sword Emanations. Sword Emanations was terrified. He screamed, "No!" He struggled wildly, but it was all in vain. His body flew toward the giant sword and disappeared into it. Clang! The giant sword buzzed, and the entire valley shook violently. Lu Ming flew out of the deep pit and stood in the air to watch from afar. The giant sword shook more and more violently. Finally, it rushed out of the ground and flew into the sky. After circling in the air, it rushed directly toward Luo Xiang. When it got close to Luo Xiang's body, it became smaller and smaller. It entered Luo Xiang's glabella and disappeared. At that moment, Luo Xiang opened his eyes. A powerful aura was emitted. Great sage perfection. Lu Ming was secretly shocked. Luo Xiang's cultivation had also reached the great sage perfection. It seemed that Luo Xiang had also obtained a great opportunity because of this giant sword. Moreover, Lu Ming discovered that Luo Xiang's spiritual body was also extraordinary. It had evolved to the point of a mid-level spiritual body. Back then, when Lu Ming first met Luo Xiang, his spiritual body was only an inferior spiritual body. 15 years to nurture a sword soul. It's really not simple. Lu Ming whispered. He had long felt that Luo Xiang was not simple. He had already mastered the law of speed, which was one of the laws of the king. Now that his cultivation had reached the great sage perfection, he had obtained the giant sword, and cultivated a magical sword soul. His combat strength was definitely terrifying. Luo Xiang got up and looked at Lu Ming. He smiled and said, "Lu Ming, long time no see. I didn't expect to meet you here after we parted in Sangzhou. I also didn't expect to see you here. What's going on with you guys? And your master?" At this point, Lu Ming paused and sighed. "My master, he must have fallen," Luo Xiang said with a sad look in his eyes. "Yes." Lu Ming nodded and said, "He seems to have lost his spiritual consciousness. His soul is no longer there. His soul was destroyed by the sword spirit." Luo Xiang said, "Lu Ming, let's leave this place first. We'll talk as we go." "Okay." Lu Ming nodded. He then shot up into the sky with Luo Xiang and flew into the abyss. They then flew toward the exit of the sword tomb. Along the way, they did not encounter any accidents. Soon, they flew out of the sword tomb and into the distance. Along the way, Luo Xiang told Lu Ming about their encounter after they escaped from Sangzhou. After they escaped from Sangzhou, they did not go to the ancient moon sacred ground. Instead, they followed a caravan and took the teleportation formation to the vicinity of the Tai sword tomb. Later on, Luo Xiang followed the life and death sword sect leader to the sword tomb to cultivate and accidentally entered the abyss. The sword spirit had been planning to attract other martial artists and use their blood as a sacrifice to the sword. In addition to the energy of the sword origin, it had broken through to the martial emperor realm. Therefore, the sword spirit had split into a sword spirit and destroyed the life and death sword sect leader's soul to control him. As Luoxiang had cultivated a sword soul, he was protected by the giant sword. Moreover, Luoxiang had cultivated a sword soul, and used it to destroy the sword spirit's sword spirit. Therefore, the sword spirit had thought that Luoxiang was dead. In fact, Luoxiang was still alive and had formed a connection with the giant sword. However, with his strength alone he was no match for the sword spirit. In the end, the sword of the Heavenly Emperor had appeared and released a powerful force to attract the sword spirit. Only then did Luoxiang make his move. He cooperated with the giant sword and attacked the sword spirit. Lu Ming was enlightened. He finally understood the cause and effect. Luoxiang could be considered to have profited from the disaster and obtained a great fortuitous encounter. Unfortunately, the life and death sword sect leader had died, and this made Luoxiang feel sad. The two of them flew more than 10,000 miles away and landed on a mountain peak. Lu Ming summoned the autumn moon from the mountain river painting. Chapter 1901. After Autumn Moon heard this, she was also quite surprised. She didn't expect that the sword of Celestial Emperor that Lu Ming pulled out in Celestial City would play a big role here and save them. Autumn Moon, the ingredients are ready. Why don't we refine the spirit recovery pill here? Lu Ming said. Since the ingredients were ready, Lu Ming wanted to refine the spirit recovery pill as soon as possible. Moreover, Luoxiang's cultivation had skyrocketed, and he needed time to consolidate it. It was better to refine it here. Anyway, the environment here was more secluded, and there was no need to be afraid of being disturbed. And that works too. Autumn Moon nodded. Her eyes flashed with anticipation. She also wanted to know what was the memory that was taken away from her. When a person knew that a part of their memory was taken away and was blank, they would always think about it and be curious. This would also cause an obsession in their heart, which would affect their cultivation. Immediately, Lu Ming took out the Great Pill Development Furnace, and then recited the refining method of the Spirit Recovery Pill in his heart. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he took out all the ingredients one by one. The Spirit Recovery Pill was a very high-grade and rare pill. It was also very complicated to refine. It was a slow process that couldn't be rushed. Lu Ming threw the first type of material into the Great Evolution Cauldron and began tempering. When the first ingredient was almost refined, he put in the second ingredient according to the order and began refining. He let the two ingredients fuse together in a strange way. Of course, the ingredients in the beginning were all auxiliary ingredients. As for Luoxiang and Autumn Moon, they sat cross-legged on both sides of Lu Ming, a few miles apart. They were cultivating while guarding Lu Ming. Time passed day by day. This time he used half a month's time to refine the medicine. Clang. Half a month later. With a thought, Lu Ming opened the lid of the furnace and an elixir flew out. Success. Lu Ming was overjoyed. He reached out and sucked the pill into his hand. Lu Ming examined it carefully. It really was the Spirit Recovery Pill. It was exactly the same as recorded in the prescription. After spending half a month, he finally succeeded in refining it. In a flash, Autumn Moon and Luoxiang appeared in front of Lu Ming. Autumn Moon looked at the pill in Lu Ming's hand with anticipation. Mid-Autumn Moon, the Spirit Recovery Pill has been successfully refined. Take it. Lu Ming said. All right. Autumn Moon nodded, took the pill, and swallowed it without hesitation. Then he sat down cross-legged and began to refine it. Let's hope it works. Lu Ming clenched his fists nervously. The Soul Recovery Pill might not be able to restore Autumn Moon's memories. There was also a possibility of failure. If he failed, then it would be difficult to find the materials for the Spirit Recovery Pill again. However, Autumn Moon had been with him all this time, and it did have some effect. This could also increase the success rate. Lu Ming and Luoxiang stood by the side and waited. There was a layer of light on Autumn Moon's body. The law of yin and yang circulated continuously. It was obvious that she was refining the pill. 3 days later, Autumn Moon opened her eyes. Had she recovered? Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. Qiu Yu's eyes were initially filled with confusion. Slowly, her eyes regained their luster. She looked at Lu Ming and suddenly revealed a happy smile. She moved and pounced on Lu Ming, throwing herself into Lu Ming's arms. Young master, Autumn Moon remembers you. Young master, you finally came to find Autumn Moon. As she spoke, Autumn Moon's tears flowed down, wetting Lu Ming's clothes. Autumn Moon, have you recovered your memories? Lu Ming asked. Yes. Autumn Moon rubbed Lu Ming's body a few times, wiping her tears on Lu Ming's clothes. Then she blinked her big eyes and looked at Lu Ming, saying, Young master, I have recovered. What happened before, please don't blame Autumn Moon. She was referring to Autumn Moon's attitude towards him. When they first met, she even treated Lu Ming as an opponent. Don't blame? Of course, you should blame me. How dare you treat your young master like this? You should be punished. Lu Ming deliberately said with a straight face. Then how should I punish you? Autumn Moon asked softly. What do you think? Lu Ming smiled. Autumn Moon suddenly stepped forward and kissed Lu Ming's lips. Then, she glanced at Luo Xiang beside her. Luo Xiang's eyes immediately darted around, deliberately looking in other directions as if he couldn't see anything. Is this okay? Autumn Moon's face blushed, and her voice became lower and lower. Girl, I haven't seen you for a long time, but you're getting bolder and bolder. Lu Ming smiled bitterly. However, he was also happy. Autumn Moon's memories had finally recovered. The way she looked at him was exactly the same as more than 10 years ago. Autumn Moon stuck out her tongue and made a face. Autumn Moon, let's go back to the Origin Mountain Academy. Lu Ming said with a smile. Young master, I'm afraid we can't go back yet. As soon as I recovered my memories, I felt that my spirit embryo was bright. It seems that I'm about to break through to the Supreme Saint realm. If we miss this time, Autumn Moon said softly. You're about to break through? Lu Ming was delighted, but he wasn't too surprised. Autumn Moon had already reached the perfected stage of the Supreme Saint realm. She had been accumulating for a long time, and her accumulation was enough. Now that her memory had recovered, her spirit embryo was bright, and her mind was clear, so it was normal for her to have an opportunity to break through. Anyway, we don't have anything else to do. Your breakthrough is more important. We'll wait for you here. Lu Ming said. The opportunity to break through could only be encountered by chance. If they missed this time, they didn't know when the next time would be. It would be a waste of time. Okay. Qiu Yu nodded and floated up and started to cultivate. Lu Ming and Luo Xiang guarded Autumn Moon. Autumn Moon closed her eyes and sank into a deep level of cultivation. She ignored the outside world and focused on breaking through. Saint power surged on her body, and the law of yin and yang lingered. Every day, her aura would become stronger. Just like that, half a month passed. Autumn Moon's aura reached its peak. Boom. As if something had shattered, a powerful aura burst out from Autumn Moon's body and rushed into the sky. Then, Autumn Moon opened her eyes. With a wave of her hand, a large pile of origin stones appeared. Autumn Moon began to absorb the origin chi of the origin stones, and the origin chi of heaven and earth. This process lasted for 3 days. After 3 days, Autumn Moon's aura reached its peak. The aura of an absolute saint. Autumn Moon became an absolute saint first, reaching the initial stage of the absolute saint realm. With Autumn Moon's king body talent, her battle power would definitely skyrocket after becoming an absolute saint. Even Lu Ming wasn't confident that he could defeat Autumn Moon now. After a while, Autumn Moon ended her cultivation. She withdrew her aura and stood up. Autumn Moon, congratulations. Lu Ming walked over and looked at Autumn Moon. He was quite emotional. The girl who had grown up with him had become an absolute saint now. In the vast land of Yuan Mountain, she would be a top genius. Who would have expected something like this? It's all thanks to you, young master. Otherwise, I wouldn't have broken through so quickly. Autumn Moon smiled. Okay, let's go back then. Chapter 1902. Celestial City was always so prosperous. As the #1 holy land of Primordial Mountain, countless powerhouses gathered there. The platform where the sword of Celestial Emperor was located had lost its former liveliness. Since Lu Ming pulled out the sword of Celestial Emperor, this place gradually became deserted. Above the platform, a young man stood in the air. This young man was dressed in snow white. His clothes were snow white, and his shoes and socks were also snow white. His black hair was scattered, and his 2 eyes were as dazzling as 2 stars. At this time, this young man exuded a terrifying aura as his eyes stared at the platform. The sword of Celestial Emperor was pulled out. When did it happen? The young man asked with a cold voice. Beside the young man, there was an old man with a gloomy look in his eyes, and said, "About 5 months ago." "Who is it?" The young man continued to ask. "This person controls the law of primal chaos. He is a very young genius. We have sent someone to investigate. He is the genius of Primordial Mountain Academy, and his name is Lu Ming." The old man replied. "The law of primal chaos. Lu Ming, humph, how dare you take away my Hung Xinghe's sword? You really don't know what's good for you," the young man said, and the killing intent in his eyes grew stronger. It turned out that he was the #1 genius on the Sage King board, the Eternal Son, Hung Xinghe. But that kid is also smart. After taking away the sword of Celestial Emperor, he disappeared. We have used various methods to inquire, and that kid is not in Primordial Mountain Academy during this period of time. He should be out training, the old man said. "Humph, unless he never returns to Primordial Mountain Academy, my sword will always be mine." Hung Xinghe snorted coldly, then turned around and left. In a citadel outside Celestial City, Lu Ming, Qiuyu, and Luo Xiang stepped out of the teleportation array. It took them half a month to reach the nearest teleportation area, and then through the teleportation array, they returned to the citadel of Celestial City. Out of the teleportation array, they rose into the air and flew toward Celestial City. Not long after, they returned to Primordial Mountain Academy. Of course, Luo Xiang was not a disciple of Primordial Mountain Academy, so he was naturally stopped, but with his talent, he easily passed the test and became a member of Primordial Mountain Academy. As soon as he entered the Yuan Mountain Holy Court, Lu Ming discovered that the Holy Court was much more lively than before. In the past, many people were in closed-door seclusion in the various cultivation grounds of the Sacred Academy. But now, it seemed that many people have exited their seclusion. Lu Ming was surprised. Not long after, they arrived at the King's Sage Board. The number of people on the King's Sage Board has increased, Autumn Moon said. Lu Ming nodded his head. Previously, there were only about 40 people on the King's Sage Board. Now there were more than 80 people on the board. The number had doubled. It was obvious that many people had broken through to the Absolute Saint Realm during this period of time. They were improving, and so were others. Therefore, in the competition between geniuses, once one stagnated, one would quickly be surpassed by others. So many paragon geniuses. Luo Xiang's eyes glowed with battle intent. The 3 of them didn't stay for long. After taking a glance, they flew back to their residence. When he returned to his residence, he found that everyone was there. Huang Ling, Long Chun, Huang Li, and the others gathered together. "None of you are cultivating in seclusion?" Lu Ming asked curiously. "Lu Ming, you came back just in time. Tomorrow is the Great Emperor's lecture. If you came back a day later, you wouldn't be able to make it." Huang Ling said with a smile. "The Great Emperor's lecture. Looks like I'm in luck." Lu Ming smiled. "Miss Autumn Moon, has her memory recovered?" Huang Ling looked at Miss Autumn Moon with a complicated expression. "Yes, I'm in luck this time. I found the materials I needed and refined the soul recovery pill. Miss Autumn Moon's memory has been recovered." Lu Ming said. Everyone came forward to congratulate him. Then Lu Ming introduced Luo Xiang to everyone. "Lu Ming, I heard that you pulled out the sword of the Heavenly Emperor. Is that true?" Long Chen suddenly asked. "That's right." Lu Ming nodded. "You have to be careful. Some time ago, the Hung family has been sending people to inquire about you. I heard that Xing Xinhe has already said that the sword of the Heavenly Emperor will be his sword. Now that the Great Emperor's lecture is coming out, many Sky Prides have come out, including Xing Xinhe." Long Chen frowned. "You're afraid that Xing Xinhe will find trouble with me. It doesn't matter. At most, I'll put the sword of the Heavenly Emperor back, and see if he can pull it out." Lu Ming laughed. "Good idea, haha." Huang Li also laughed. Everyone was either in seclusion or traveling. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. Naturally, they had a lot of topics to talk about. Some even fought on the spot. A day passed in the blink of an eye. The next day was the day of the Great Emperor's lecture. The Great Emperor's lecture was set 2 months ago. During this time, almost all the sky prides came out of seclusion. It could be said that it was the busiest day of the Origin Mountain Sacred Courtyard. Lu Ming and the others flew to the highest mountain in the depths of the Origin Mountain Sacred Courtyard. The Great Emperor's lecture was at the top of the mountain. At the top of the mountain, there was a flat land. It was very open. On the flat land, there were tens of thousands of praying mats. At the front of the flat land, there was an old man in a gray robe. He looked very ordinary. He was sitting there with his eyes closed. On the praying mats, many people had already taken their seats, but there was no sound at all. Everyone was holding their breath. When Lu Ming and the others arrived, they looked at the old man and their hearts trembled. The old man looked very ordinary, but the seat he was sitting on was the seat for the lecture. The one giving the lecture today was the Great Emperor. Needless to say, that old man was a great emperor. The Origin Mountain Sacred Courtyard was founded by 3 great emperors, but the great emperors were elusive. After joining the Origin Mountain Sacred Courtyard, they had not seen a great emperor. Now they finally saw one. Lu Ming and the others also held their breath and sat down on some praying mats. Next, more and more sky prides arrived. Suddenly, Lu Ming felt a cold aura shrouding him. He looked back and saw a group of sky prides walking in the air. Among them, he saw Luo Pokong, but Luo Pokong was not at the front. In front of Luo Pokong, there was a young man. That person's face was cold, and there was a faint arrogance in his eyes. He looked at Lu Ming coldly. "Young master, that's Luo Tsangqiang." Autumn Moon transmitted her voice to Lu Ming. "Luo Tsangqiang?" A trace of killing intent flashed in Lu Ming's eyes. "Kid, Autumn Moon is mine. You'd better get lost if you know what's good for you. If you don't, you will die a horrible death." Luo Tsangqiang's voice sounded in Lu Ming's ears. Of course, he was transmitting his voice. With the great emperor here, no matter how lawless Luo Tsangqiang was, he would not dare to make a noise. "You think too highly of yourself." Lu Ming replied indifferently, showing a faint disdain. "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.